Hi all again. I'm here trying to have a conversation on anything that was hype last year, that is hype this year, and trying to remove the hype, trying to talk to people that build stuff and launch stuff, and try to also cut the bullshit that you can hear in all channels with someone that has a strong rationale in what she's doing. And this is Sandra Helou. From, I guess, somewhere in the Middle East. Sandra, ciao.
Hey, Carlo, how are you? It's very happy
good,
to be
thanks.
here.
Where are you videoing from?
You know, you were right. I am somewhere in the Middle East. So I actually am residing in Dubai, but currently I'm in Beirut, Lebanon. So
Okay.
I guess GCC with a little bit of Beirut.
Okay, so just to start by telling a bit about yourself and why we are having your conversation. I have to say we met at Web3 last year in London conference that is now called SEG3, Sport, Entertainment, Gaming. And we'll be again, I will be there end of June, by the way, 28, 29 in London again. So she was on stage and I said, whoa, this is something who really knows what she's talking about. She's building stuff and she's also trying to ask and answer as possible certain key questions that I saw last year. But tell me about yourself more in detail if you want.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, look, last year was really nice meeting you, to be honest. I remember the event that I was at. It was pretty interesting, the questions that were coming. And I remember you asked a very interesting question, and that was how we started the conversation together. So, you know, as you said, my name is Sandra, building and focusing on the metaverse and the spatial web space. I believe firmly that...
and this is your cat?
Sorry. Supporting Actress Award goes to her. You know, I firmly believe that, you know, in the space, it's very important right now that the hype does balance down. And for anyone who kind of does interact with my content on LinkedIn, they'll notice that I do try to bring a lot of reality and rationale to the space and what's actually happening, because there are, for me anyways, there are three levels that are happening currently, right? You have the hype, you have the talkers, the experts, and then you have the builders. And it's a very interesting balance between the reality of what it is to be building in the space right now and what the narratives are in the media and within the market, because in all honesty, they don't really compare. So for me, you know, I've been in the space for quite a while now. I think since graduating university, I was very lucky to be I graduated at that time when everyone was going traditional digital. And now I'm very lucky to be experiencing it again, where people are going digital, Web3, digital, spatial web, digital, you know, blockchain and all of that. For me, none of the technology is new. And I think this is where the media is trying to kind of bring this hype narrative into it. But everything that exists now, we were already using back then. We just didn't call them what we do now. You know, we were still doing NFTs. We were still discussing blockchain technology. We were still talking about the metaverse, but it wasn't the metaverse. So I hope that was a good intro for covering kind of my background and where I'm focused on, but this is pretty much where I see the space.
Yeah, and I think just to be a bit on the educational, if you want, side, and I'm sure you have been asked this question 10,000 times, but let's try again. Define, as it was last year, define the buzzword Web3. Blockchain is not a buzzword, but basically define a bit that space as it was 2022.
I mean, look, it's kind of difficult to answer that, right? Because there isn't a unified answer. Everyone has a different, when this question is asked, everyone has a different answer on what is Web3, what is the metaverse, what is blah, 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 so on and so forth. I think for me personally, and I can only speak on what I've kind of been trying to do, and that's educating the market on the broader vision that's actually taking place and what's happening. I've always believed that, and I've always called the space, you know, the spatial web. Web3 was very good in kind of pointing out that we are now transitioning from a Web2 era into a Web3 era, which means that, you know, the transitions need to occur in so and so phases for you to get to this level. It was merely like kind of a benchmark, I guess you could say, of, you know, this is what we did in Web2, this is what we're adopting for us to be under the Web3 umbrella. For me, everything that's happening in the space falls under the spatial web. Now, some people could come out and say, no, it's spatial technology, it's spatial computing, it's spatial this, spatial that. But what I'm comfortable in referring to it is spatial web, because for me, that's what brings everything that we're doing right now into the next evolution of what we have. So the transition that I'm witnessing, or that I've been a part of, has been, people are less focused on using terms like Web3 right now, and they've kind of just shifted into focusing more on the added value that each pillar within the spatial web is bringing. I don't know about you, but for me, it's very rare right now to still see people or hear them speaking about Web3. I think now it's become a bit more focused. Either they say, let's talk about AI, let's talk about metaverse, let's talk about spatial computing now, thanks to Apple and some of the rest. But I think that term has kind of not died down, but its narrative has changed.
But so it may become a long conversation, but I want to try to be super rational on all the things you said. So tell me a bit about it, which I think it was very, if there was one storytelling that I understood personally, and I like, was transition from Web 2 to Web 3 in terms of, Web 2, everything that happened with social media, we are a product, blah, 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 that's wrong, to what at some point the focus was, this is the era of the ownership. So you become owner of your data. So where do you think, because obviously we have seen something in 22 that kind of deflated. And we saw, I don't know if there may not have been a correlation, something like generative AI, not AI in general, because I was doing AI in 1985. It was a different type of AI on whatever sun machines, crazy stuff, different thing. So this is the hype now is, even if people don't understand, because in AI per se, forget for a moment generative, it's maybe accelerating, but we were doing it like in the last years the same. Generative AI is honestly a bit I understand the hype if you want. On the other end, things were deflated, and I want to understand why on one end, and I also want to predict, but maybe at the end of the conversation, how this hype will deflate. But that's another story. So Web 2 to Web 3 and the ownership things. For example, I was using MetaMask. And the first time you do it, okay, you have to understand what you're doing. But then, it was so easy to, connect another experience to MetaMask. I didn't want to go back to having password and password saved, whatever shit. It was too complex. I think UX was a problem in general for everything of that space. But with this Web 2, Web 3, how do you see, is it still happening? Does it still make sense? Forget the terminology per se. Is it happening how for you? Because that's not clear to me. I'm asking like honest question.
Look, for me, it's not so much a technological shift that's happening right now. It's more a behavioral and it's a behavioral and a human shift that's taking place. The shift for me didn't happen on a technology basis. Like I said, and like you just said, the technology has always existed and it's always been there. What for me has been the biggest changer within the space is how humans have been interacting with this technology. So for me, it's more working on the psyche of how we're going to apply and adapt these technologies to day-to-day of a person who's already used to, doing something one way. And I think every period in history has had this massive shift in its movement, where you've seen human behavior, human interactions, and human touch points kind of pivot and change. So for me, this was less about technology and more about human. And that's why it's been interesting, because not everyone understood look, I can give you a perfect example, right? When everyone was talking about decentralized identity and, being decentralized and not having to do KYC or anything, a lot of the times my narrative was within the company that is that the company within the metaverse is that, you do need to have a level of KYC. You can still operate as a decentralized function and have decentralized, applied to certain areas of what you're doing. But if you want to elevate and you want to interact with others, then there does need to be a level of KYC involved. And I remember back in 2022, that used to cause a lot of problems.
As we say in Italian, KYC. What the fuck is that? Careful with acronyms. I have an acronym. I'm CDM, so I'm the king of acronyms. But be careful.
KYC is, know your customer, and KYC is done. It's done everywhere. You do it when you go to the bank. You do it when you sign up to an app. You do it. It's done on a day-to-day basis without us knowing. It's essentially, just verifying that this human is who they say they are, and this person is actually a human, and linking, some kind of metadata to them. So then you can identify that this is this human and this is what they're doing. When you're building an evolution of what we used to have, and I can only speak about the metaverse because that's what we're bringing to market, I can very easily say that having a decentralized metaverse, if you want it to be a prolonged journey that we kind of adapt to our day-to-day, and then it becomes the next evolution of the internet, there will need to be a level of KYC. And that's not because I don't believe in decentralization, or I don't think decentralization is important for certain elements in what's happening within the blockchain space. It's just because, you do need to safeguard a bit of the protection in what it means to have multiple people engaging, collaborating, communicating, interacting with one another. And for ownership as well, when you own a house, or when you buy a house, when you buy a car, you get a deed, you get a license, and it all has your name on it because that proves that you own it. Now, I understand with the blockchain layer, the wallet can verify that this is yours and you own it. But once you get to the metaverse, once again, and you can have multiple identities and you can have multiple assets across multiple platforms, it starts becoming very difficult. And that's why, I've always pushed for this interoperability for the metaverse, and just in general for the space, where you can KYC an individual, they can have multiple identities under this one KYC, and then they can kind of integrate and move freely between different areas where they want to associate, where they want to interact, or where they want to engage. I don't know if that answered your question. I hope it did. But I think for me, it's less about a technological shift. For me, it's more about the human shift, because now we're focusing on getting humans to want to use the technology rather than saying to them, look, the technology is here.
And you think on that, it's very deep. I'm reflecting. I think one angle that I saw, and I mentioned it before, but I thought last year, I say last year as a historical moment, don't take it, literally. There was a problem of UX in high level. Not so things were so complex that thinking that those things would go mainstream was a bit naive. Or not? Disagree? I'm happy if you disagree.
No,
I'm not an expert, so.
No, I completely agree with you. And this was one of the biggest problems, is that you had builders building. The way that things happen in the space, and any startup founder or any founder that comes in can tell you, is that they put a lot of effort into the tech team, right? Because marketing and UX, UI, and design come secondary, because in their thought, it's if we get the tech, then people are going to love it, then we can go get investor money, then we're ready to go to market. Why Apple has been very successful is that Apple works on the product and on the design, and then of course they're working on the tech, but they put a lot of effort into the design and the product as well. They run market research, they do market studies. It really just comes down to who's leading a team. And I have to say this because from my background, I do come from a multidisciplinary background. So other than being involved in tech, I do have a design background. So for me, design is equally as important as tech, because if I'm taking something to market, the end user needs to understand what it's doing, and it needs to be seamless and easy. It just really needs to translate into the market that this is how I become a part of your day-to-day, and this is why I'm simple to use. What happened back in 2021, 22 was that you had a lot of the builders who were leading with the design. And when that happens, they build with a tech mindset rather than a user mindset. But I think what's happening now is I can only speak from my perspective and maybe a couple of other projects I've seen, but I think a lot of people now are starting to understand that design does play a very important role in how you get mass adoption to occur. But it doesn't even need to be mass adoption. I think speaking mass adoption is a very broad term that people like to use. Mass adoption doesn't really cover everything. You have certain people who use PayPass, which is the credit card, that you just pay by tapping it. And you still have a lot of people who just still, prefer using cash. Mass adoption is never going to actually occur in terms of mass adoption. All it means is that you have a certain percentage of markets that are more than willing to follow what the market narrative is saying to them and kind of adopt it into their day-to-day. Now, for me, UX, UI, and just design in general is extremely important when you're going to market, when you're doing your market testing, because you could have the best product in the world, but if it doesn't resonate with the end user, it's definitely going nowhere. And this is why a lot of people sometimes pivot. This is why narratives change in companies with founders, because brilliant tech and then they missed out on getting the user to understand why it's brilliant. This is why I'm a big fan of, when we talk, not using a lot of jargon. A lot of people like using big words that could be easy to pronounce, difficult to pronounce. But then, you know, if I'm reading a post or if I'm reading an article, and at some point I'm struggling to pronounce a word or I have to Google it, then chances are I'm just not going to really connect much with it, because I just want it to make sense. This is why, you know, it's important for me people understand that just talk to the market like you're explaining things in a way that resonates with them, rather than telling them what you do. Explain to them what you do. You know, there's a big difference between the two.
I think that's a point that I've learned through the years. This is the tension. What you're talking about is also that, staying more in the general, is the tension between innovation and familiarity. Because in theory, innovation may or not, but normally breaks a bit the familiarity of user, you know. But I've learned, even if I was very radical maybe at the beginning, when it was easy, pioneering times, you really need to kind of be careful with following a bit off the familiarity, or really be good at explaining what is unfamiliar, because people will not just adopt it. So it is a very fine, if you want, path to walk, because you need to be, as you said, I do something amazing, you don't understand it, you don't use it, and you don't need discover why it can be amazing for you, but you just don't know because you're not captured, basically.
I mean, look, familiar. Sorry, I always have a hard time saying that word, kind of like interoperability. Reality it's difficult to kind of bring to a whole market, right? Because what's familiar to you is different to me, and this just comes down to social and cultural icons that are used. You know, different cultures and different countries have different icons that resonate with them based on what to do and what not to do. The thing that can put everyone's mind at ease is that design principles don't really change, right? Within UX UI, you know that design principles, you follow them. You know, this is what this principle means, these are the best practices, and this is what happens. A couple of days ago, I think I posted about Apple releasing their new spatial computing design principles, I believe it was, on intuitive human-centric design for the Vision Pro. And pretty much it was just a guideline. You know, if you're building for the Vision Pro, this is kind of what the design layout is going to be. This is why everything that we do personally and internally in the company, we always build it based on design guidelines and brand guidelines. So everything gets explained to the whole team that, look, this is what our guidelines are, and this is what our principles are, and this is how you can adopt them. And this is, I just want to mention very quickly the metaverse here. One of the things that we've been very good at doing, and what separated us from the market, is that we've been able to adapt localization to the metaverse. Initially, when people started talking about the metaverse, there was this, I guess, umbrella that there's going to be a narrative that gets pushed across everyone. But as humans and as builders in the space, we need to understand that the West and the East have different cultural aspects. They have different standards for what it means to be, operating and interacting and engaging. And this is just normal. This is like when you travel to a new country you haven't been to before, you need to get used to their customs and to their kind of way of doing things. That doesn't change with technology. You know, when you build, especially when you build a product that is going to be used for engagement, you need to take these things on board. You're not building an iPhone. I mean, an iPhone is easy to kind of adapt to a whole, because that's it. You work on the design principles that you've applied. But when you get into the metaverse and when you get into more a personalized approach, you do need to take these things on board. Like, we're not just building for one user, we're building for multiple users, and multiple users have multiple ways of knowing, understanding, and doing things. Look, I can give you a very easy example. In Lebanon, you know, when we say hi to someone, we give them 3 kisses, which is, you know, so many times I've gone to say hi to someone, they don't either do that. Either it's like we get caught on the 2 kiss, and then we're like having this awkward moment where I'm like, do I go in for the 3rd or do I not do that? Yeah. And then it's like, you know, do we shake hands? Do we not shake hands? So, you know, and this is just simple human to human interaction. Now, on top of that, put a product and put technology, it does get a bit difficult. And this is why the metaverse, for me anyways, needs to be localized, because it does vary, you know. So I hope that example kind of resonates with people. But
the 3 kisses, I think, if I remember well, it's also in Switzerland. I've always been face to face like that, super awkward moments. But I'm also never learned to do the very American hand hug. People come, I never to do. So yeah, I totally get it. And to be honest, I've been basically, even if living in this town of Torino for all my life, I've been traveling 35 years. I've been not only traveling, which is great, but working with people in most countries. I don't want to say all. And it's the beauty of, okay, it's beautiful to be on holidays, but I love so much to be working, or because it's a different connection. And it also maybe sometimes I don't want to be a tourist, even when I'm on holiday. I try to, get into the culture, because that's when you work with people, you have to do it. Like very often we were there for like 1 week, 2 weeks. Yeah. So you have to do it bam, bam, bam immediately. So totally agree that when you put it in an artificial, if you want, word or ecosystem of interaction, it's even more important. Absolutely.
No, definitely. These are the principles,
Go. Sorry, I saw that document, and it's really cool. And later on, we'll talk a bit more on that announcement also of last week. There's one thing that I wanted to ask, again, more for educational purposes. Okay. I know you're less focused on the pure technology aspect. How do you think blockchain will remain central to this, or not? Or it's an option? It's a tool that we have to use when we need it, which was a bit more idea, but again, from an external point of view.
Actually, to kind of be a bit reasonable here, I started with blockchain for me is very essential to everything, right? Because blockchain is a means of ownership in the space. It's also a means of it's a connector. The metaverse can exist without blockchain layer, but once you get to gamifying, incentivizing, and rewarding, you include the blockchain layer. My background, when I was at Zilliqa and as head of their metaverse and NFTs, was dealing with the blockchain and bringing the blockchain into the NFT space and into the metaverse space, and that really hasn't changed because we're still doing that right now. The blockchain layer is very essential. It's the core basis of what this next evolution is going to be. But it's understanding how blockchain is going to play a part that people are not really understanding. NFTs are, and I know now I'm going back in times, but NFTs are not JPEGs. They were never JPEGs. It was never an image. It was never just about art. NFTs are used as a means of, rewarding, as a means of ownership, as a means of connecting. They hold so many assets and use cases to them that kind of like bottlenecking them into this little area wasn't fair. It wasn't right, and that's why you kind of notice the space right now in the market and the shift that's happening. A lot of the discussions around NFTs have kind of become side conversations. So they would say, we're talking about the metaverse, and this is how an NFT can be a part of it. We're talking about blockchain.
Absolutely.
And this can be a part of it. It's no longer the title; it's now the subheading, and that's what's changed.
So good that you brought that, because I immediately started creating NFTs with my CTR that I do on OpenSea, trying to understand stuff. And there were a few things that also were said last year, like when you do start something like that in this space of, for the sporting industry, if you don't have a long-term view of what you're doing, it's like zero value from day one. Then there was too much. The one thing that I'm trying to understand, and maybe NFT is, I think NFT was the buzzword, even if it's not only a buzzword, that was most damage in this phase, I guess. I don't understand. So you remember the innovation cycle, the hype cycle. In theory, we should tend to the plateau of productivity now for everything that was hype last year, more or less. I don't know where we stand. Do you have an idea?
I mean, look, the NFTs, when they were introduced, like I said, it wasn't introduced with use cases. I don't want to name projects, but I can very easily name maybe
I can.
Yeah.
Everything exploded with the NBA Top Shot and my friend at that.
And you had Socios who came out, and they came out and they were like, bring on board all the sports fans and blah blah blah, and we give them NFTs. But the NFTs actually did nothing. You cannot give up. Ownership is a very important word. If you own something, it's yours. You've put time, energy, maybe even money into it. When you own something, that's it. This is mine. When you are given an asset or a product or anything, and it's given to you and it doesn't add any value, then that's inefficient for you to say, I own this. Look, that could just be my mentality around it. But if I own something and I want to go out and say, look, this is what mine and I own it, I needed to add value for me. So what happened was last year, a lot of projects came out and the use cases just added no value to the end user. I don't need to purchase an NFT and hold it in my wallet and set up a wallet and set up a new identity and do all the steps that are required for you to later say to me, this NFT gives you a discount. You could have just given me a coupon. You could have just sent me an email and said, look, you get a discount. There it is. Where people went wrong was they were trying to go to market with a lot of strategies, but the strategies were missing use cases that applied to actual ownership and that applied to actual community engagement and building. And that for me was the problem between how NFTs were introduced and where NFTs went wrong. I think jumping on the NFT bandwagon was an extremely difficult situation for a lot of people because, and you see it daily now, you know, this person bought this NFT for 5 million and now it's worth, I don't know, $10,000 or something like that. It's because the inflation and the prices just kind of were like fluctuating up and down from project to project, but they were just pushed by these narratives. The actual use cases didn't exist. I am yet to see any use case that has grown or any use case that has actually evolved for me to be like, oh, okay, this was valuable or this was worth it. What I'm interested about now is the role that NFTs are going to play in the subcategories of what it means to build an entire strategy. Like, for example, we put a lot of effort and energy right now, me and my team, into supporting brands updating and kind of adopting their loyalty programs to Web3 and to the metaverse and what it means to gamify and incentivize users and all of that. NFTs are our core part of the strategy because the NFT plays a part in unlocking all these different rewards, all these different incentivization mechanisms, all of these different kind of connectivity and groups that previously you probably would have found really difficult to kind of bring into one asset that can do all of these thanks to a smart contract attached to it. So this is where the blockchain plays a part. Previously, that didn't exist. You know, that was inexistent. So that's how the market kind of had their first touch point with NFTs, and then it kind of died down. And I have to say the events that were happening didn't really help either. You know, there were all these multiple events that would take place, and they kind of really didn't do much. Everyone has an opinion, but that doesn't mean every opinion.
I saw that I remember now, months ago, I saw that where you were upset of going to events that was complete, and I don't remember, but you were upset. I'm going there and it's useless. It's,
you know, there's been a lot of times where I've been on panels and you know, I have wanted to be like, and I have done it where I've gone, you know, I fact check what you're saying. And this is something that I always don't only say to people next to me, but I also say to people listening to me, you know, always fact check, like always double check your facts before you jump in and you do any kind of decision. You know, I could be telling you something from my perspective, which might not be 100% based on what you believe or what you think is right.
Yeah.
So, you know, always fact check in life. But, you know, the space in general has just gone, I don't know if you picked up on this. So I've been trying to do a podcast for a while now, and I just have not been able to find the time to actually launch my own podcast. But a couple of weeks ago, something really interesting happened, and it has to do with NFT, so I want to tell you about it. I got sent a notification that Rolex has entered the NFT space. And it kind of shocked me because, you know, Rolex is a very big brand. If Rolex is entering the NFT space, I'm pretty sure I would have known about it. I'm pretty sure there would have been more marketing, more, you know, just certain steps that would have been taken by Rolex as a whole to kind of enter the space, right? So I jumped on this landing page, and just being the person that I am, obviously I went into the back end, tried to see if this real, is this legit, is this not? Turned out it was a fake website pretending to be Rolex. So it had the same Rolex logo, had the Rolex watches, it identified as being a Rolex NFT. Anyone who was not familiar, I don't want to say with technology, but anyone who is not familiar with kind of assessing the, you know, SSL certifications of websites and all of these things probably would have fell for it. But initially what it was, it said, you know, connect your wallet and there's 1,000 Rolex NFTs left. Connect your wallet and claim an, you know, limited edition metaverse NFT for Rolex. So what happened was I checked this sort of blah, 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 went to the back end, did all of the things that, you know, you would do to just check the validity of a website. And once you check the code and you do that, it became very clear to me that what actually happened was it was a Rolex reseller pretending to be Rolex, launching a website called Rolex, what was it? I think it was like Rolex/.com or something, Rolex/NFT.com, I think it was. and pretending to be Rolex. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about this, and I mentioned it, is that as the space evolves, we're going to see a lot of these things, right? You're going to see a lot of people who are, if you look at luxury as a whole, right? Luxury, you have the mothership, and then you have all these other entities who kind of sell the product and who are resellers and blah blah blah. These people are going to be launching their own products, and the only way to do it is going to be through, a brand guideline or an identity that needs to fall under the mothership, because that's what their products are. People need to be very careful where they're kind of putting their money and what they're actually purchasing when it comes to NFTs, because you need to validate it. Now, any other person would have felt for this website, because like I said, it honestly actually looked like a Rolex website. It had the writing, it had the same color guidelines. It looked exactly the same. Now, imagine if someone had connected their wallet, probably paid money. A couple of things could have happened, right? Either they could have been hacked, they could have lost their whatever they used to purchase this NFT, and their identity could have probably been compromised if it was done in a way where you could track what other assets they've owned and blah blah blah. Now, this for me is why, and I'm probably going back a lot, but this is why KYC is important. This is why decentralization is important, but needs to be monitored. And this is why in the space we kind of do need to regulate what an NFT means, what it's attached to, and verification of brands and influencers and key people in the space with what they're doing. I think it's like a bit of like the wild, wild west right now, to be honest.
I think it was quite naive thing that I saw all these people, especially if you come with more, if you want an anarchist mentality, you love the centralization. And for many reasons, the fact that, I don't know, I'm transferring money with my bank. I'm doing the job and I have to pay a commission. That's absolutely crazy. So in many ways, it's okay. On the other hand, the fact that this, as humanity is built, will go well, there's no way. So what you're saying is you need to combine the advantages there and to protect people, basically, and even to make it usable. Because the story you told would make everybody say, whoa, 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 we stay away, because we're not expert as Sandra, so it's dangerous. And that, I think, and I think the biggest thing in this area was everything that has happened or is even happening now with crypto per se, which scares people in the end.
It's actually funny. I found the screenshot I took. I'll share it with you later, maybe if you want to show it. But the website. Yeah. The website was called. Yeah, here it is. So it's very simple to see, but anyone could fall for it. And this is the thing, and this is what happened in 2022, 2021, I believe. There were a lot of these scams where people were just purchasing things and they're like, oh no, what did I get myself into? So yeah.
And so let's focus a bit on what maybe the second or the first biggest buzzword of last year, metaverse. And again, I'm doing something you won't like, but tell me how you define it. I mean, what is it for you? Even if I know maybe you don't want to use it anymore, but give a bit of.
I mean, look, for me, and I've always been very clear on this. The metaverse is it's an addition of your day-to-day for a business, right? What we do is we build metaverses. We're a metaverse as a service provider. We're a platform that works on the interoperability layer that supports. Think of us as a multi-tenant, right? We're a multi-tenant metaverse as a service platform, which means you can have multiple metaverses, but we all use the same product. It's kind of like living in an apartment complex, right? You have your own house, you have your own key, but you're all a part of the same building. And this is essentially what we do. We build products for the metaverse layer so that whoever launches on our platform can freely move between different metaverses. They can have one identity that they can use, and they can have one wallet which connects all of their assets. The reason for that is because, and again, I go back to the problems that people face in the space, is that multiple identities, multiple wallets, multiple blockchain layers. What was happening was there were a lot of these activations that were going out. Brands would launch a metaverse, but it would be very difficult for an end user to kind of connect with it. Because I wouldn't drive my car if I had to change a car every time I wanted to go down a certain street. It would make no sense. It's inefficient. It serves no purpose. The core element of the metaverse needs to be that it adapts to your business operational model. It becomes a part of your day-to-day operational needs to connecting internally and externally with the end user. We don't see it as this like mini activation where you come in, you complete this assignment or this task, you know, win an NFT, you get rewarded, and then that's it, you leave. No, for us, we apply it to your HR, we apply it to your community building, we apply it to connecting your social channels. We see it as a connector. You know, for us, it becomes a part of the everyday. And when we set out to build this mass layer, it was extremely important that we simply focus on what it means to be interoperable and how to build this multi-tenant mass layer where individuals can have their own space, but they can be interconnected with others. So this is what sets us apart from a lot of the metaverses out there, because we really just do work on the stack layer. And another part of the business is, yes, obviously we do consulting. You know, we work with brands on how they can adapt the metaverse, how they can adapt Web3, NFTs, spatial web, so AR, VR, spatial audio, you know, all these other elements, blockchain as a whole, to their business operations per their industry. You know, and this has been our biggest win, is that not only are we able to build a strategy with you, but we are able to also help you deploy in an area that becomes yours. And it's a place where you can just continuously run it. We never really believed in scarce land, which is why we never sold land. It was never part of our business model, because you cannot have scarce land in technology, you know, especially when it comes to the metaverse. It doesn't work that way. You can always duplicate and open more instances and more environments to create more land. So the concept of scarcity doesn't exist when you're talking digitally or virtually or in the metaverse. It does based on restrictions and constraints that occur, but these can be overcome easily, and you know, they can be overcome through tech. It's not like you are buying an apartment complex and you're buying a piece of land and there's a building here and a building here and that's it. You cannot extend. Yes, this is scarce land, but when it comes to technology, that doesn't exist as a concept. And I think that was one of the biggest misconceptions that occurred in the space that kind of really played to the metaverse's narrative. I think a lot of people started to seeing it as it served no purpose. And I can be very honest with you, Carlo, and say that there's been multiple clients who have come to us saying, we want to enter the metaverse. We've had a workshop with them, and then by the end of it, we've said to them, you just need to update your website. You don't need a metaverse. You know, and we've done that. You know, we've done that multiple times. We've never really gone with just attracting people and launching them. We've always said to them, look, if this doesn't apply to you, it doesn't apply to you. You're wasting your time, you're wasting your energy, you're wasting your money, and you're kind of pivoting your narrative from what you actually do to what you just want to do to follow the hype. One of the things that we do that's been very successful is we work on private proof of concepts. So what we actually do is we work with our clients on private proof of concept, based on the strategy that we've built with them. So we pick, let's say, up to 2 use cases. We build these environments. We run testing. So we run tests internally and with a small group of trusted community members or you know, whoever they want to invite. We run a test. We see if the environment works. We see if the use cases appeal to them. We reiterate based on the feedback. And then once we've done this step, we then say to them, okay, look, you're ready to deploy. So our actual model has always been different to what the market has done previously.
And in terms of, so there are 2 aspects. One, do you consider Roblox part of this family? Because I think I can say, just looking at the data, Roblox is the most adopted, similar things to what we are discussing, but you may disagree. I'm interested in it because there is people using it like a lot. I mean, look, you may think it's not what you're talking about, but I want to have your opinion on that.
It's an opinion, right? Like you rightfully said. At the end of the day, for me, Roblox is a gamified world that brings people together for, I guess you could say, just like mini activations and like more based on how can we gamify and how can we engage people in this instance here for this purpose. I wouldn't say it's a difficult question to answer. I know I can answer, but I want to answer it in a way that doesn't upset anyone. And I think that's where it is, right? I guess the best way to say it to you is, you know, there are multiple cars that get you from point A to point B, but what varies is the level of luxury and the level of what the car does. You know, a Rolls Royce is not the same as as a entry point car.
You can say a Fiat, it's okay.
Even though both cars get you from point A to point B, the experience is different. And that's, I guess that would probably be the nicest way of putting it. Roblox does what it needs to do, but its vision as a metaverse is not our vision.
No, clear. Why is it so popular, you think?
Look, it's popular because, I can only speak from my cousin's perspective, right? I have little cousins. Every single time I'm with them, I'm sorry to say this, but they do not give a damn about what I'm doing because it's not Roblox. And I say to them, look, I also have avatars. I also build metaverses. Look, they don't care, because their age group is they want to be in Roblox. They want to run around. They want to play around. They want the engagement aspect of it. But that doesn't mean that they don't understand what a metaverse, again, what a digital world is. But we need to talk two things. You have a generation where their reality is digital. You're not introducing the metaverse to them. This is their reality. This is they're used to it. This is what they do. Then you have another generation which is trying to understand how this new technology is going to apply to what they already know and what they've been dealing with throughout their their journey, their experience, their skill set building, their careers. You need to apply interest to both of these categories, otherwise you won't succeed. So while we are building for our focus is on government entities, our focus is on luxury, our focus is on esports teams, banking and finance, automotive. Roblox's interest, while they do have these clients building worlds within them, the experience will vary. You will never see us building the same experience as Roblox because the appeal will be different.
Yeah.
So when I sit with my cousins, and I have to be honest, and many times I even cave in and I have my own Roblox just running around with them playing games. They're interested, but they don't need to apply what we do for what they want to achieve. It's two completely different scenarios.
Yeah, no, it's quite fair, quite good description. Let's move on. I need to phrase it properly, otherwise you will scold me. So the UX aspect of whatever you call immersive experiences, etc. So because one thing that, again, was a bit naive or maybe delusional was, and let's forget for a moment what happened last week. The fact that people spent, apart the gamers, and unfortunately I'm not a gamer, so I'm not really, I always talk about things I've been immersed. So staying with whatever visor on your head, you think that was not a roadblocks for what happened last year? I don't know. I have the impression that thinking that everything will be that immersive. I'm sure it's not what you think, but I'm saying that was the narrative. So we will do, Meta and even Microsoft, there is clearly a problem in adoption of devices, even if it could be a minor UX problem, but it failed so many times. I still have the picture with the Google glasses, so I'm embarrassed like shit. So I think
if I
what do you think?
Oh no, wait, you can't. If I move, you'll probably see my Meta Quest. Oh wait, no, there. See there.
Yeah.
For me personally, I've always been an advocate for AR being the technology that's going to kind of bring these immersive experiences together way faster than VR, only because of the level of immersiveness that it brings and just the ease of access to it. Right, for us to assume that everyone's going to be walking around with a VR headset is a bit it doesn't really make sense. Right, for two reasons. One, the cost of ownership right now is still predominantly high without proper use cases or a need for it. Two, there aren't that many experiences for people to own a headset right now to kind of be walking around just experiencing it. Me personally, I think I own every version of I own every version of the Meta Quest that has been launched. And I've tried multiple others as well because it's just a part of understanding what we're building and what we're doing. I don't personally think that there needs to be competition, even though competition is good and healthy for innovation. And this is just how I think of it, right? And I can kind of give you an example of why I think that. When we started off, we had proprietary technology that was attached to what we were building in the metaverse. And then we later discovered, not that we discovered, it was already kind of a vision that we knew would happen. And it was something that we knew we had to pivot from. But when we first started, we had kind of based our metaverse on proprietary technology that we had built internally and that we were kind of leading with in terms of this is what it means to build a metaverse, this is how you optimize it, this is blah, blah, blah. You later start to understand and realize that when it comes to proprietary technology, it is kind of difficult to grow as big as the top three are. Now, when I say the top three, I'm speaking from my perspective, right, which is going to be NVIDIA, Omniverse, Unreal, and Unity. The work that they are doing and the speed of innovation that they're bringing, whether it's across AI, whether it's across the metaverse, proprietary tech for any builder is going to be kind of difficult to keep up with them, especially when you're working on that base layer. And that's what I'm talking about, just the base layer. Proprietary tech and IP and all of that does fall in when you're talking about APIs or apps that fall within this layer. And I hope that's clear for people listening. So
yeah, it's a bit on the techie side, but I agree. I totally
you get what I mean, though, right? So when we started to pivot and when we started to relook at what we were doing, we realized that it serves no purpose for us to have our proprietary tech, because if we utilize these three and then we work on the attachments through our own PT, it makes more sense. Now, why I'm saying that is because if you look at what Meta and what Apple are doing, one is a software company that bought Oculus, later throughout their journey, they acquired it, and then they've kind of pivoted and now they're focusing on it. One is a hardware company that really understands humans and what they want that they design. Even though they do have an element of software in them as well with the App Store and all of the products that they put out, you have two separate visions competing, but they're not competing directly. They're competing. One is more focused on VR. One is more focused on AR. The narratives are completely different. And I can even throw in HoloLens right now from Microsoft. Microsoft.
We develop on that. So I've been through.
The narrative is completely different. When HoloLens launched, it went straight to enterprise. And for me, the winner in the space is, and again, I can only speak from my perspective, is going to be who is going to unify our day-to-day. And for me, it's Apple, because I have a Mac, I have an iWatch, I have an iPhone, and I know that when I own the Vision Pro, it's going to be interconnected. For me, the Vision Pro wasn't so much innovation in terms of, oh, wow, AR, this is what it's going to be. No, it was more, oh, this is what the future of computing is going to look like. Oh, so this is what owning a laptop and a desktop is going to be like right now. Mm-hmm. It became just an extension of what having a computer meant, and this is why, for me, I don't see them competing. There will be some areas where they do try to overlap, obviously, but at the end of the day, it does just come down to the market and who can integrate it in their day-to-day more. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm being more realist with this, and I'm trying to be too rational about it, but that's just how that's how I see it.
Yeah, I wanted to close on Apple, but you anticipate, which is good, don't worry. So let's take a break for a moment, and we go really trash. So tell me, how do you use ChatGPT? Forget what you do. Forget, I mean, as a person, what it meant to you. How I know we're going trash for a second. Come on.
Can I be honest? Right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
I've used it twice, and I actually don't use ChatGPT. I use Board.
Okay. No. Okay. Sorry. Yes.
No. But the reason why is that ChatGPT kind of. I mean, to be very honest with you, I in my day-to-day, what I've done is with my team, I've said to them, look at what we do, look at our processes internally, and see how AI can be applied to kind of streamline it and make it easier and make it more efficient.
Generative AI. Sorry, I'm a bit obsessed on that. AI, we did it. We are doing it everywhere. It's improving. I just want to focus on generative AI, which I don't want to say it didn't exist, but the way it came out, it's clearly the difference. And I want to focus a lot on that, because people are just saying AI. I mean, I cannot tell too much, but I've been with the AI people working, and nobody was listening to us, to be honest, until 6 months ago.
Yeah, no, and it makes sense, but I think a lot of people probably don't understand what generative AI is. Like, when I don't know if you saw my post a couple of days ago about the lawyer who used ChatGPT to write his case.
Yeah.
And then, there was a follow-up where I explained how AI actually works. But the thing is that, okay, AI is very broad. As AI, it's been around for a very long time, extremely long time. It's extremely broad, and there are certain parts of it, like, for example, you can narrow it down even to ANI, which is artificial narrow intelligence. You have AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, and then you have ASI, artificial super intelligence, and each segment offers something, right? So ANI is, for example, stage 1, right? It's machine learning. Stage 2 is machine intelligence, and stage 3, which is ASI, would be it would be machine consciousness, which is where, as humans, the computer has pretty much just surpassed our knowledge base, right?
Yeah.
I don't think people are ready to segment what AI is, and I think they just lump it all under AI. So when you say generative AI, I agree with you. And I think people just need to understand what that means just a little bit more. For me, though, I think these things didn't happen overnight. And for anyone to think that we woke up one day and AI just suddenly was like launched like that is completely delusional, Yeah. Even when we're talking about big brands who are now launching, oh, this is what you can do with so-and-so, superimpose this video. This didn't happen last week. This had been, this was being done since 2018, 2017, maybe even 2001, maybe even 1980, God knows when. But, these things did not happen overnight. So
I think it's, for me, what is the difference is the access of everyday's people to some part of these no-code technologies. I created a model, no code, low code, code, whatever, for my understanding of things. The fact that with no code, you can do stuff that normally you need team. So I'm using it a lot. I've also, just to test, I created this physical book, which is an idea I had, a narrative with pseudo write. So this is horrible. 24 hours I had the book based on my concept that I had, and then I had Kindle Direct Publishing to ship it to me. Yeah, someone read it. I didn't read it. I just wanted to prove the point. Someone read it. If you're in almost retired and you want to read something, it's not that horrible. But I mean, these things are somehow impressive, somehow scary. I don't want to go into all the debate, etc., because it's too vague.
I think touching on what you said, right? The way I see it is that on a day-to-day, we've always interacted with AI. And I know we've been building the metaverse layer that I spoke about, because AI plays a very big role in the metaverse, right? When it comes to NPCs, when it comes to personalization, when it comes to a whole bunch of things, it's not new. Even when I was at university, if you wanted to have your professor pay attention to your thesis, you'd put AI somewhere and, he'd love it. Hi, Mr. Campbell. I don't know if you're watching this, but anyways, for one of the things that changed now in the market is that AI became accessible in a way that people could apply to their day-to-day and actually see the benefits. And that for me was the switch that the market needed and the masses needed. They were always using it. They were always interacting with it in some way or another. The only difference is that now they can it's tangible. They can actually jump on a site and they can see how it can apply to their day-to-day. I was sitting at a coffee shop last month, and the person sitting next to me, I could see them putting together a deck, but they would take the title of what they wanted to write about, put it in ChatGPT, and then they would just copy paste what was given and then put it in the deck. And I remember when I got on a call with my team next, and I was telling them the story. I'm like, I literally saw this person sitting next to me in this coffee shop literally use ChatGPT to fill out an entire deck. And I wasn't eavesdropping. I could just see it on the side of my eye, So it's funny to see how everyday people are now just starting to kind of understand, oh, I could save time by doing this. I know a lot of social media agencies who, they used to hire maybe 3-4 people to come up with content calendars for them. And now they don't need to do that. They just go in, they put it on ChatGPT and comes out. One thing that people need to understand, though, is that we are not at that stage yet. You cannot fully depend on AI or what AI is right now, generative AI, for it to give you the output that's necessary and required. Me personally, and I know this could get into a touchy subject, but I do believe that there are certain industries that can replace humans with AI, and that only comes down to where the decision is based on emotion. Because any decision that's based on human emotions can impact you as a user greatly, dependent on what the other person is feeling or doing. And that just comes down to if the answer is a simple yes, no. So for example, if you have a strategy or if you have a process, right? If you do this, then this equals that, and this is the variable, and this is the parameter, blah, blah, blah. If the end goal can be impacted by human emotion, but the answer can be yes or no, for me, this is where I feel AI can actually replace humans, but there are other situations where they don't. And I remember once I wrote about it on LinkedIn as well, and I gave an example about trying to change a plane ticket, where I knew the answer would be, yes, you can. But I think the person on the other end of the call was having a bad day, and they made it extremely difficult for me. They kept saying, I'm like, but I know I can. I know I can. So.
No, I think so in the productivity area, which is the most obvious one, and I tend to not push people to use. I'm normally, if there's something new, not because I want to be on the latest, trend wave or whatever. If I don't put my hands in it or I try to understand why am I talking about it. So I'm using it extensively, especially to understand how I can use it. Basically, in certain areas, it's super useful. Even it creates a lot of bullet points list, which normally are not good. I normally give a lot of content and then use a bit back. I use it a lot to do scenarios, because very often, even if I know stuff, I don't remember 12 ways of doing things. I see it, but this one I forgot. So it's very personal. You can use it. It may end up getting some people extremely productive, but also extremely stressed, because you're basically doing it's like having a small team, right? So, but if you have a small team, it's you doing the job in the end, because even if you have to cut and paste, you have to copy and paste. You have to copy and paste. So there is a danger of, yes, more productive, but also in the end, you're doing too much. Happening to me, to be honest. So, how do you see this? Sorry. How do you see this area, especially with the chat interface, etc., impacting what you're doing in some way? Because I'm just saying, chat has always been there, but chatting with something that delivers something to you in that way is not really. When Alexa came out, everybody thought the voice interface was ruling the world. It's not, and it's even decreasing a bit. So in an area where even when you're building stuff, it's easier to write few instructions instead of touching a lot of buttons in an interface. Do you see an impact in your backend? Do you see an impact with, for example, if people can build stuff? Do you think that would be expected, that I go there and say, build a house, whatever? Sorry, I'm doing a stupid example. So both B2B and B2C.
No, and I think this is what I touched on when I started talking about the proprietary tech. A lot of the top 3 that people generally use now to build or to gamify, they do have an element of AI. Like I said, what we do in specific, we can't depend on an AI to say, look, build the metaverse for us and design this. But what we can do is we can apply it to our design process. For example, if we're looking at doing quick mock-ups, we can use generative AI in that sense. Look, I guess for me, the best way to answer this, and again, I don't want to be that person that kind of brings negative energy into a conversation, but I think we need to watch and see how rules and regulations are going to apply before we can actually take decisions on how to apply it into something very structural, right? For now, it makes sense to have it in conversational aspect of, you use ChatGPT, on, I don't know, your marketing strategy and helping you ideate and helping you come up with ideas. But I think we need to just really see how things are going to model out when it comes to the rules, the regulations, and just the entire structure around AI as a whole. Before you can kind of bring it in on that layer and say, okay, now I can kind of fall back and depend on it. It is a part, like I said, it is a part of what we do with the metaverse. NPCs are trained using AI. Personalization comes with a level of AI design.
And NPC, explain NPC for everybody.
It's a non-playable character, so it's usually just the avatars that are in the background that don't really add much value to. They're just there to fill space. They play a part when we're looking at avatar and assistance avatars. AI plays a part. When you're looking at chatting in the metaverse, it plays a part. When you're looking at safety and security, it plays a part because it can detect, certain words. It can support in building parameters around safety bubbles and all of that. But again, this is different. This is a different part of AI. This is more a tech-focused section and part of what AI is in the overall structure. Because for me, there are 2 separate conversations. You have the day-to-day, which is how can I use ChatGPT? How can I use Bard? How can I use Midjourney to elevate some of my time and some of my stress and some of the inefficiency in my work and my personal life? And then the other part of it is, okay, how can I take this technology? How can I build on top of it? How can I apply it into my build? And how can I help use it to, just elevate my go-to market and my product? So these two right now are not, while they are part of a broader strategy, we're not looking at them as two conjoined kind of narratives, right? Because this has its time and pace and space, and this has its time and its pace as well. So I hope that answers your question. But trying to kind of be very broad in regards to people understanding that it's not linked. You have your tech aspect of AI, and then you have your day-to-day
absolutely
output of what LLP is and what LLM, and I hate using acronyms because I get confused between all of them right now. But with the outputs that are happening, so
large language models.
Yeah, I know. We need to just put one.
So I'm keeping you for more than an hour. It's embarrassing. I'm sorry, but
no, it's fine. I'm enjoying it.
It's so cool. This one I wanted to talk Apple at the end, and I already sensed that you loved it, but let's go deeper. But one thing that is crucial that I'm not sure, so I think I understand, but maybe having your perspective, how central is the concept of avatar virtual goods? So in everything we have talked to until now, do you think avatars? I mean, I'm talking about my avatar. So how I represent myself in that sense, is it even with the latest development, how central it is? Could it be a bit less central because of the direction Apple is going, or no, that didn't change the centrality of avatars, if there is a centrality, sorry?
I mean, look, identity is kind of difficult to discuss, right? Because identity as an individual in your physical world is constantly changing. It's the evolution of a human at the end of the day. From the day you're born till the day you pass away, your identity changes, whether it's from the things you like, whether it's from your haircut, whether it's from the design, whether it's from just the relationships that you have and you decide to kind of keep around you. The human identity is always changing. And I think when it comes to avatars, there's a couple of things happening right now in the avatar space, and it's without getting very technical about it, but there are different avatars that can be generated based on how a person looks, right? Whether it's through, you have avatars that are done where they take the images and then they kind of like create an avatar based on that. Then you have the avatars which are modeled, which are 3D modeled and built through Blender, and then rigged and all of that to kind of resemble what a human could look like or what you could look like. And then you have kind of the NPC avatars, so like these gamified avatars where you just take on this personality and then it kind of becomes your character. And this is more visible in games, right? Where you're assigned this character or you can pick one. Now, if we look at the space, right, this is why identity is extremely important and why it's important to be KYC'd, because ideally what would happen is we would get to a level in time, or to a stage in time, sorry, where you're KYC'd at the top level and you can have multiple identities beneath you. So you could have this identity for interacting with gaming. You can have this identity while interacting with a more professional environment. You can have this identity while interacting with the Meta Quest. You could have this identity while interacting with the Vision Pro. You can have this identity. So I think for me, what's important is that people understand there needs to be this top layer that connects all of these avatars to you. I mean, look, if you were to ask me personally, my opinion varies from people to people. I know a lot of people have issues with data and what it means to control your data and what it means to give access for people owning your data. For me, my vision on that is different to maybe yours and someone else's, but I personally appreciate and understand technology to the point where I am comfortable in some share of data to believe that, if it's KYC'd and these things are happening, then I know why they're happening and I know the reason for it. Obviously, there are always going to be these constraints and variables. You can never trust anyone, and this is just something you cannot trust anyone in life. And that's just, okay, maybe that was the wrong way to put it. You can't trust people, but as in when it comes to your own personal data and your own personal information, I know a lot of people have a very kind of hard block around, no, this is not something I'm comfortable in doing. But if you want to have an avatar that represents you, and this is going to be your identity in the next phase of the internet, it's going to be like having an email address. You know, I think everyone has like 600.
I see. I see it
personally,
as an extension.
I have 8 email addresses. I have my favorite email address that I use, and I have my work email address, and then I have my one that I use only for subscriptions, and then I have one that I use for, I don't know, PayPal or whatever it was back in the day that I never log into anymore. You know, you have Hotmail, you have Yahoo, you have Gmail, you have Outlook. It's going to be exactly the same, but the difference is that this is based on a character. It's based on identity that will eventually own assets. You don't want to be moving between asset to asset to asset, multiple identity and identity and identity. It just becomes very difficult.
Yeah. To be honest, that what you're describing, and again, as you said, it's personal. I had to write a blog on Medium, even for myself. It's called Multiple Identities, as I started new phase in February. So I'm professional, whatever, blah blah blah. Then I'm doing electronic music. Then I'm doing photography. Then I'm doing DJ set with vinyl records yeah, I need to be careful. I cannot bother people in a certain ecosystem with my other identities.
Yeah.
So even without any technology, at the moment it's more through social accounts, right? But I have multiple identities, and they are for different groups of people or audiences or whatever. So it's not easy to navigate even before anything new. I mean,
no, it's not easy at all, and this is why there needs to be that layer that everyone just agrees on, that interoperability layer, and it's going to be difficult. You know, saying everyone agrees on doesn't mean that we all sit down, hold hands, and say yes, we all agree on that. It just becomes the standard, right? Where okay, at this level, this is what needs to happen, and then this is what happens in the breakdown of it. We are early, and this is why platforms like us. We pay attention to. This is why we've built it as a multi-tenant architecture, and why we've built it in a way where you do get KYC at the top level, and then you can have multiple identities that are linked to your person, to yourself, and then you can utilize it in different areas, right? The reason for that is, again, the wallet will remain at the top level. So your wallet is connected to your KYC level, which means that all your assets can be accessed at the bottom avatars and identities that you have. And this just removes a lot of the bottlenecks that people face between having to move freely from metaverse to metaverse, from space to space. And like you said, you have multiple identities. I have multiple emails, like we just said. When Second Life came out, people pretty much created multiple versions of who they wanted to be. Sometimes they wanted to be male, sometimes they wanted to be female, sometimes they wanted to be a doctor, sometimes they wanted to be, I don't know, an architect. In Habbo Hotel, for example, there were multiple identities. If you look at Instagram, you have people who have 2 profiles. Some have their, I don't know, let's say work profile, and then they have their personal profile. Again, multiple identities. Identity as a whole is very different. It's very kind of particular and specific to talk about when it comes to the space, which is why for me, it's not a lot of discussions need to happen, because if we're looking at things from a platform layer, every platform can build their own value metrics or their own value system of what it means to have an identity, right? Everyone can have their own narrative around what it means. But if you look at it from a government or from a regulatory perspective, then that could trickle down into what it means to have a standard. And all it comes down to is really just standards. I mean, just quickly mentioning Vision Pro as well, even though this isn't something that they created, which is the output file .usd, it is one that is now being pushed, and I've started to see a lot of people talk about .usd, but .usd actually is going to be that standard for the metaverse layer, because it's how people are going to start putting outputs for their 3D objects, which is what builds the metaverse. So, it's a bit tricky, because you kind of have people who are saying, governments need to set rules and regulations, but then you have big companies who hold a large part of the market in terms of the users and in terms of their products, coming in with setting the standard for how they're building. And now it's just a matter of getting both of these to kind of work and agree on a layer. And then you have the people who are in the middle, which are the builders, and they're doing their own as well. But for me, as long as we can all get to a point where we can agree this is what the standard is, that would be more than enough. And that's simple to do, because any graphic designer If you say to him, I want a .png file, he'll understand exactly why you want it. If you say to him, I want a .jpeg, I know why you want it, and that's it. It's just the standards. And they exist.
Yeah.
These standards exist, like I said, but it just needs to be discussed with more builders in this space to understand exactly what they want and what their core is. I probably rambled on a bit too much on identity, but that's something that
it's a complex matter. Sorry, audio was breaking up. It's a complex matter for sure. Let's close on last week announcement from Apple. It's clearly not a device. It's a platform paradigm shift. It's a new era, blah, blah, blah. Just give me your take on that.
I think I've spoken about Apple enough throughout this entire session. Like I said, for me, what Apple released was a vision for what the future of computing could look like and could become. I know there was a lot of discussions about the price point of what it was launched at, and people saying it's not built for masses, but in all honesty, it didn't really shock me. I think with any new innovation that Apple has launched, the price point has always been higher initially because of the fact that they're opening the doors for the builders to come in and populate it, to test it, to provide feedback on it. Do I personally think that the price point is high? Based on the vision that they're looking at achieving, I would say probably not, because again, it's like buying a MacBook, it's like buying a desktop MacBook Pro, it's like buying a desktop iMac or an iPad, even though it's not priced that much, but you kind of get what I'm trying to get at. So for me, it's Vision Pro kind of set the narrative for what it means to think of the future of computing, which is something that not many people had touched on previously. A lot of people took the headsets and made it more about the social engagement and the social interaction. But the thing is that for you to get people to socially engage and interact outside of their physical self, so in the real world, there needs to be a reason, there needs to be a use case that's strong enough to get them to want to do that, that brings and connects people together. For me, what I saw based on the event was that if this Vision Pro can interact and engage with evolutionizing how my computer is connected to these immersive experiences, then by all means, that for me is enough as a use case to want to purchase it and to engage with it, because then that's it, you're immersed in the experiences that you're having. It becomes a different user experience that we haven't had yet. I personally didn't see it as a AR headset or a VR headset, and I didn't see it as something that had to do with the metaverse or with avatars. A lot of people are saying, Apple didn't mention the metaverse once, they didn't mention AI at all, but the core aspect of the technology is the spatial, it's spatial web, it's spatial tech. It's the interconnectivity of all of these pillars coming in together nicely and working together. So, I hope that kind of gives you my perspective on it. But for me, it was more about the future of computing and less about the innovation of AR technology or VR technology or headsets. Yeah, it is a headset, but it's something they've been doing since 2018, and they've spent, I think, 40 billion with the testing, building the new chips and all. So yeah, that was my
I understand your take. So I was thinking as you were talking about, so you see it as, so the most impactful is we are using a laptop now, like we're doing now, and we would use something that maybe is that different, that it's immersed, etc. I remember transitioning from a laptop to a touch device was already a step for many people. I still use it for different things a bit now, right? iPad to laptop. I'm also all Apple, if you want. So I have all the aspects. I'm using it. It's clearly. So I agree on one end that the most interesting, without having tested it physically, it's so physical. If touch is physical, that is even more physical, I think. So it has to work for you, right? It has all the movement you do, and it will take time. On the price point, I don't think it's an issue at the moment. It could be, but it's early. It's so early that, price point will be a non-issue when it makes sense. I don't think it's clearly the technology that is inside is huge. So
yeah, look, I can give just my own personal experience, right? Like I said, I own the Meta Quests, all versions of them, and I genuinely have no reason to use them other than testing environments when we're doing them. Sometimes I play golf, but that's because I feel guilty that I bought them and I have nothing to do. And that's the reason for that. Is there aren't enough products on them. There aren't enough products on them for me to want to use them, to adapt them to my day-to-day, and they don't interconnect with what I'm doing. I cannot put my MetaQuest right now and have it connect to this experience. I cannot, it's a split environment. It's a split experience for my day-to-day. If I flip my camera right now and you see my setup, I have my iPad here. I have my Windows Rockstrix laptop here. I have my iPhone over there. I have a MacBook over here, and I have the MacBook I'm using here right now. So it's
similar.
And this is the thing, right? The more technology we add, the objective for a builder shouldn't be to add technology to the end user. It's to give them a reason to want to own one piece of tech that interconnects with what they're doing. This is why omnichannel was very successful. Back in the day, all the consultants were looking at taking everyone omnichannel. Let's do your strategy as an omnichannel. What pretty much that meant was, let's connect all of your data points and bring them into one platform, and then you can have access to it. It's about unifying. And that for me is going to be the main differentiator.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Sorry, that's a super good point. I agree.
Yes, it's about who can unify. At the end of the day, we don't want to be carrying. We are going to reach a future where no one wants to be carrying 60 pieces of tech to achieve different use cases. I definitely don't want to do that at all. I really don't want to do that. I got given from one of our clients my Razer. It's the Razer glasses, the ones that you put on, and then they kind of, I haven't used them yet because I don't know what to use them for. The audio is it doesn't sit right between my ears. It just doesn't really make sense. Visually, it just doesn't. So it just, again, it's about who can unify. And for me, from what I saw, without having tested the Vision Pro, I feel it would be what's going to unify. Because just look at the market, Android will come out with something, I'm 100% sure. But then again, when it comes to the metaverse and all, maybe they can find ways to make friends and build the, interoperable APIs and apps that integrate to multiple assets. But you never know. The space is changing rapidly.
Yeah. No, super. I think it's an interesting view. And the only thing that I don't like normally to try to be smart and everything and things like that, where people that are doing these things are so smart. But I was just thinking as Steve Jobs seeing the little external battery and say, what the... But that's a joke, because I think obviously the weight on that. So there's maybe good reason with current technology to do it. I'm not sure he would have not waited another 2 years to solve that, but that's another. That's me.
From what looking at the specs of it and from what I've seen, which is the information that's available, if you look at the chips that they're running, to get any kind of value out of the life, because again, they're operating it more as a computer, less as a headset. And that's why they have for me anyway, that's how I understood why they have the battery pack, because if you're running an application and you're running a computer with these kind of chips that they've put in, which I think was, I can't remember, R2 or something like that, the power will run out. I mean, it just makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, right now, if I open my laptop and I'm running Unreal, I'm running Unity, and I'm running Omniverse, the battery will just die down very quickly. It's just common knowledge because you're using multiple things. With the VR headset, so with the MetaQuest, they're inbuilt. It's not real time. It is real time in the fact that you're moving and all of that. But with the Vision Pro, from what I understood, if you're able to open it, watch a video, live stream, open your laptop, have a voice chat with your coworker and all of that, this is it's a computer that you pretty much have on your head.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's amazing technology as always.
For me, the battery pack wasn't really a problem. I mean, to be honest, I think it's a nice way to also break down the fact that now you need to charge it and go back to reality.
Va bene. I think we had a long conversation, super useful, super engaging. I hope people will stay so long to the end. I doubt we will see the metrics, but thank you so much. And obviously, so you're on LinkedIn. almost daily you have something smart to say. So it's good to follow you on LinkedIn, and let's wait for the podcast then. Okay.
Thanks.
And
thanks a lot for
safe trip back to Dubai. Grazie.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.